But the state may also determine that doing nothing is optimal. You know, we just don't know yet until that study's completed. In the meantime, we're going to switch to soda ash as quickly as we can, as quickly as the state will let us.
And then is there what's the fees for a study like that?
Well, it's really our time. We have to do the study. We've engaged an engineer, and that's Ron McLaughlin, who will be joining us at 9 o'clock. And, you know, there's going to be an ongoing process for him to do his study. And, you know, we're probably looking at $5,000 or, I don't know, it could go beyond that, depending on the level of study that we have to do. So it's really going to depend on how much time he has to put into this. Now, with regard to the implementation of soda ash, that's probably going to be about $20,000 to make that switch and implement the capital improvements, get through the design review process with the state.
But Cindy was right. It hasn't been rejected by the state at all.
Yeah.
But that's the rumor.
So that was erroneous information that's been going around.
Misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So,
If somebody has a letter of rejection, we don't have it.
yeah, okay.
Which is good news. So, and it's more communication with the state than this district has had in years, in terms of them understanding that we're serious.
Well, I'm encouraged to
Right.
hear that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good thing. Was there anything else, Don?
No, that pretty much covered it.
So are you pleased that we've got you more time without going into executive session?
That's great.
Michael, you are next on the list of invitees.
No, nothing.
Okay. And then Diane Dunham.
I want to follow up on what you were talking about with Don.
Certainly.
So what you're saying is that it's not necessary for you to gradually wean us off of OPP. You can simply stop the OPP and implement the soda ash instead, right?
That
now,
is
what
correct.
are we doing in terms of the chlorine? Since there does seem to be some confusion or some concern that we never really had an accurate control baseline study done at the very beginning. On some level, we're not even sure whether we have a corrosion control problem if we were over chlorinated back then, and that was actually generating the problem. So what are you doing in terms of the amount of chlorine that you're adding? Because at some point it was 4 times the recommended human whatever it was.
With the minimum from the state.
Right.
Okay.
Well, where we're at on the chlorine right now is we're dosing at 0.3 milligrams per liter, and we can never dose less than 0.2 at the actual treatment location, which is well 18. And so we have the chlorine ratcheted down as far as we feel comfortable doing so to maintain residual at the end of the system.
And who actually does the dosing?
Our operations, myself, Justin DeBon, and various other operators in the district.
And who actually will do the testing, this engineer or your staff?
What type of testing?
Well, in the corrosion control or your actual testing that you do on a
Well,
regular basis,
there's a number of different types of tests. When we test for chlorine residual, there is no hold time on a chlorine residual sample, so it has to be done on site within 15 minutes to get an accurate result.
And who does that test?
Our district operations.
You and Justin and whoever.
That's correct.
And when it comes to the corrosion control study, would that be the engineer? who
In
actually
terms of the initial
samples?
analysis of the water, Ron McLaughlin took a sample. I observed him taking a sample from a raw sample of water from our well, and then he conducted those tests with a lab in Denver. I believe it was Evergreen Analytical. So unrelated to the district in any way.
And that was reported already, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. It's in his report.
Alright, so once the OPP is cut off and you begin using the soda ash, how long until the average user is going to have water that's free of OPP?
I don't think we have scientific evidence of or what that would be exactly, but it was recommended that by Stephen Rogers from Brown and Caldwell and his group that it would be about 4 weeks before the OPP would dissipate.
Because that's when all the water in the holding tank to begin with is gone, and it's gone all the way through the system and out.
I'm not
It's
sure
roughly
exactly.
4
Yeah, I
weeks.
mean, it could be, some of those variables are certainly involved, but that was just what he said. He's very experienced operator and
Well, that's
scientist.
a rough ballpark.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good. So how, what is your sense of when you'll get this issue worked out with,
I think we're going to get that update at 9 o'clock, hopefully,
9
from the
o'clock.
state.
and so as soon as you've got that issue clear, you'd have the green light to pull the OPP and put in the soda?
That is correct.
Well, that's awesome.
It is awesome, and we are eager to do so.
And we'll be honest with you,
Right.
we thought, last meeting, we thought the state was going to come the following week and say it's a go, but they came back with some questions. So that's what we just did.
And you're confident that you can resolve their questions and move forward?
Yes.
Well, we're gonna hear more at
We-
9, so.
One way or the other, we will address any deficiencies that they see, and they will be addressed to their satisfaction.
Great.
So I just
Excellent.
want to comment on the chlorine, and I know, Stephen, that it's you don't want to take any chances. It's kind of why you go a little bit above the state recommended level, mainly because
The
we
state
have
minimum,
state minimum. I mean, mainly because we have leaks in the system. You worry about people's health. That's what I think I got the understanding.
And we have biofilms out in the distribution system.
But one of the things we talked about was those booster stations.
Absolutely.
And that would regulate it throughout the system, and then that you maybe would be able to start out with the 0.2 and keep it at 0.2.
Absolutely.
Which some systems they start out and then it's supposed to be a small trace at the very end. But where are we at with that?
Well, we have a capital improvement plan, and that could be presented to you when AJ authorizes that. I'm working on it. The engineer is working on it. AJ's working on it, and then we'll have prioritization of various projects, and so those will be presented to you, and you can put them up in accordance of your priorities and the appropriate funding being available. So.
Sounds good.
Right, and just, I think we'll have that information for the next board meeting. So Stephen and the engineer and I met last week to go through a whole capital plan and some priorities on things, and we want to best utilize the capital funding available.
All right. Diane, did we answer everything that?
Yes,
You
that's
wanted to
wonderful. Actually, I think some months ago, you all mentioned that you thought you'd have this alternate plan in place by November. It looks like you may be a month or two ahead of that.
Could be.
That's-
We'll keep our fingers
Last
crossed.
November was a really long wait from last year.
Yes,
So,
for sure.
Well, I think that another thing that I don't think all of the public understands, I didn't until I got on the board, is that the district could have decided to say, well, we're going to wait and do the whole corrosion control study before we make any changes. And by its nature, a corrosion control study takes time, takes that amount of time. So I hope that the community can begin to understand that, we're doing this as an interim thing. It might not end up being the optimum, but the
more
message,
benign at this point.
the message was heard that we want sequest out of the water.
Excellent.
And so I think it would be good if, obviously we wish the state had already approved it, but
Well, another question that comes up in the public is, since the study was never ever done, the corrosion control or properly done or whatnot, that why do we even need the OPPN now? Why can't we just take it out? That's what I've been asked.
because the state told us to do it.
State mandate, we have to protect.
Even without,
Well, the state has decreed that we do have a problem.
Okay.
However, they've decreed it.
Well, how they decree that is when they assign to the district to test for lead and copper and then we go out and we test various sample sites based on tiers. The tier level is number 1, homes from 1982 to 1989 when they were using lead in solder. Those are the first tier, so we have to fill up our sample group with those first, and then go to multifamily, and then to everything else that's left with that is copper pipe. And so we have done that, and when you get a sample result that exceeds the MCL, which is the maximum contaminant level,
Right.
or more than one in a sampling cycle, that automatically
Bless you.
kicks you into a study and a treatment process that must be implemented.
Okay.
And so that's how it happened. I
But
know
it was,
that
there was a mandate. I mean,
it absolutely
right.
was. Yeah, it wasn't by choice.
Right.
I
What were
see.
the dates for tier one again?
1982 to 1989. Any home constructed in that time.
Of course, it is ludicrous to me that you could have a home back there built in 1982 that was built shoddily with lousy lead, this, that, and the other, and that's the one house that gets flagged. And because of that, the entire subdivision is forced to do something.
Well, it's not quite as clear cut as that, because it's a...
Can I just address that one point?
Okay.
The whole issue that Diane raises, it's a good question. You know, why is everybody basically held to the standard of the poorest built home, if you will? And the fact of the matter is the district's responsible for the water system from the point of distribution to the tap, to right when water comes out of somebody's sink. So when you have a problem like that, you know, a home is identified as having a health issue, the state will mandate that the district do something about it that addresses the water quality sufficient to make those properties compliant. And it does affect everybody, and this is just how the state works, and there's no way to work around that.
I was going to say that there's, I mean, because I think that does seem silly to everyone that the homeowner should be responsible for its own pipes, and is that something that could never be changed? I mean,
Sorry. You think it's ridiculous that the homeowner should be responsible
The
for
homeowner
his own
isn't
pipe?
responsible.
they're not responsible. That we're responsible for the water.
Right.
And just because, like Diane said, just one or two homes, or how many, you know, very small amount of homes have a problem, we have to correct it for the whole system. So it is kind of funny. I mean, that there's no.
Well, it's also not lead, it's also copper, and most of the houses, including my house, which was built 5 years ago, I have copper pipes.
But you know, this is dealing with a level of bureaucracy way above the district. So you know, this is local and national health standards. So the EPA and the CDPHE, you know, are where these rules are promulgated from.
But if
And,
leaching
you
copper
know,
is a problem,
if-
why do you have copper pipes?
Exactly.
There's just nothing we can do about that.
It would probably be cheaper and quicker if we identified the few houses that are causing this level increase, and we all chipped in and repiped those houses.
So how many
Well,
people?
somebody wants to
How
do
many
that.
houses
But
do there
see, here's the thing: is we would still have to do our corrosion control study
Yeah.
at this point, and you know, I think that just go ahead and implementing soda ash is going to be the most direct route to getting the solution that the public wants.
Right.
Okay. Karen, was there something you wanted to ask?
I just had some comments about last night. I was there,
Yes.
and I actually paid attention. I even took notes, but it went so quickly, and there was so much that I have to tend to agree with the comment on condensing that information into a readable and understandable and public-friendly form.
Yeah.
And maybe getting it out there, and maybe even a little bit more for us who like to dig a little deeper. So we know which pathways to go if we're wanting to find out accurate information and the facts on the situation, so we can actually make it, you know, a self-decision that's based on that instead of erroneous, you know, feelings or whatever. So I it came out of there, it was a lot more questions, even than when I came in, but I didn't feel like I was appropriate to ask them all, or I'd be like hitting them with like a bajillion questions, and that's not appropriate for a public PowerPoint presentation. So I'm actually, think I came out of there needing more information,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
and in a way that we could understand the logic of it, because I got the gist of it, but there was a whole lot of things like having to do with the financial part and the bonds and the new laws and how specifically they would threaten our water supply. And the thing about the transfer of the agricultural rights into the well, that was a little fuzzy for me. I didn't quite get how that all worked. And, you know, just things like that. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I do. We've been hearing this need for ever since 2008. And the more I hear, the more we get this kind of information, then we begin to understand.
And it is a new thing